When you think of Landfall, you picture green, right? I know I do. I want to turn that archetype on its head by making a Landfall deck without green. It might be impossible, but join me on this journey today while I rant and rave about how to make a terrible deck, which could be better if I added green. I decided to go with the Spellslinger colors of Izzet because there's one commander that actually mentions lands in its text box. That's Keranos, God of the Storms. This indestructible god is a 6/5. You have to have devotion to make him a creature, but when we draw our first card each turn, if it's a land, you draw an additional card. If it's not a land, it deals 3 damage to any target. I saw the land in the text box and I thought, Landfall, Landfall, Landfall. Might be idiotic, but I'm going to make this work somehow, some way. The real question is, how do we even ramp in Izzet? I've got our options right here, and it's super tough, but it might be fun. First up, there's Bitterthorn, Nissa's Animus. This living weapon equipment comes into play with a little germ, and whenever it attacks, you're going to get a land card, a basic land card, into play tapped. I remember when Burnished Heart was an absolute staple. Now it's dog water in the words of the kids today. It just lets you sack it to search for 2 basics and put them into play tapped. Canoptic Wraith is a Burnished Heart that just likes to attack. It's unblockable, and when it deals combat damage to a player, you can pay 3 mana, sack it, and get 2 basics, just like our favorite little elk. If you think Harrow's one of the best ramp spells in a Landfall deck, you're right. Let's make it happen, but in mono blue with Dreamscape Artist. This little guy, you can tap him, have a Harrow effect just by discarding a card, and get those 2 lands. Druidic Satchel allows you to tap it to reveal the top card of your library, and if it's a land, you put it straight into play. The other text doesn't matter to me, and it shouldn't matter to you because this is a Landfall deck, gosh darn it. I just love giving my opponents things, besides Rage, of course. So we have Hithlane Rope. It's going to allow us to search our library for a basic and put it right into play. Then we just give that to a player so they can do it too. Gotta share the love. Besides the traditional ramp of searching our library and getting lands, we can also put them directly into play from our hand. That's where Horizon of Progress comes into play. It does just that for 3 mana. Guess what? It's time for some more classic staples. That's Myriad Landscape. You can pay 2, sack it, get 2 lands of the same type right into play. We also run an overcosted Cultivate in this deck. That's Navigation Orb. It does the same thing as Cultivate, but it takes a long time and it takes 5 mana. Patron of the Moon is going to allow us to put 2 lands directly into play for 1 mana. It costs 7 mana, so there's a chance we may not have any lands in our hand, but I hope we can draw some. If you saw Solemn Simulacrum and you thought it was too powerful, you'd be right. That's why I have Scampering Surveyor. It just has the first half of it, let you get a land when it comes into play. Of course, I'm a fan of broken cards. That's why I do run Solemn Simulacrum. Let you get a land when it ETBs, and when it hits the bin, you draw a card. We also run the original Bitterthorn. That's Sword of the Animus. It just gives an equipped creature +1/+1, and when it attacks, you get a basic right into play tapped. Terrain Generator is another one of our ramp lands. It taps for a colorless, or we can pay 2 and put a basic land card from our hand right onto the battlefield. I demand that Wizards of the Coast reprints Walking Atlas. It's never been reprinted, and they screwed up the first time. It's not an artifact creature. They listed it as just a creature, but it allows us to put a land card from our hand directly onto the battlefield. It's also part of a sweet, sweet combo with this. Our last piece of ramp is a staple in my opinion. That's Wayfarer's Bauble. It's a 1 mana artifact that you can pay 2, tap it, sack it, and search our library for a basic and put it right into play. I guarantee you didn't know there's this many ramp spells in non-green. I know I didn't until I started doing some research for this video, but how are we going to take advantage of all these extra lands? I tell you, Landfall. Let's get into those cards. Our first piece of Landfall tech is Akum Hellkite. This 4/4 for 6 has a landfall ability. When a land ETBs, it deals 1 damage to any target. If that lands a mountain, it's 2 damage instead. The next piece of Landfall tech is Geode Ranger. It may be a 6 mana 4/3, which are terrible stats, but its landfall ability makes up for that. When a land ETBs, we're going to goad all creatures target player controls. We're not getting attacked, we're staying safe. The next card is the inspiration for this entire deck, Grappling Kraken. When I opened it up in Foundation, my mind started going. So I was like, let's build a Landfall deck. Another one, since I have so many. And when a land ETBs with this guy, we're going to tap a creature an opponent controls and put a stun counter on it. Guardian of Tazim does the same thing as Grappling Kraken, just not as good. When a land ETBs, we get to tap down a creature an opponent controls, and if that lands an island, it doesn't untap. Timing is everything. Morag, Fury of Akum proves that. You need to play your land in your second main phase so you get that extra combat step and it works out the way you want it to. Aliens are not the only one laying a ton of eggs. That's why we've got Nesting Dragon. When a land DTBs, we make a dragon egg, and when that dragon egg hits the graveyard, we get to make a 2/2 flying dragon with fire breathing. Retreat the Core Helm's another landfall piece. It's going to allow us to scry, but the most important thing is to tap or untap a target creature when a land DTBs. It's part of our sweet, sweet, sweet win the game combo. Now it's time to go over what I consider the best landfall piece in the entire deck, Royal Elemental. When a land ETBs, we get to steal our opponent's creatures. They're going to hate it, and we're going to love it. We are a red deck at our core, so we love dealing damage. Spitfire Lagak has a landfall ability that's going to deal 1 damage to each opponent every time a land ETBs. We're going to burn them out. Trench Behemoth may not say it has landfall, but it does. You can tell by reading the text. Whenever a land ETBs, we're going to make a creature in opponent control attack next combat if able, and it also allows us to return lands to our hands to play them again. I've already mentioned we're a red deck at heart, so we have to deal more damage. Tunneling GOP does just that. When a land ETBs, we deal 1 damage to each opponent. Our last piece of landfall tech is Valakut Exploration. When a land ETBs, we get to impulse draw, and if we don't play that card, we get to deal some major damage to our opponents. Okay, we've made it through all of our landfall pieces, so that means the deck tech's overwrite. Wrong. We're going to get into some cards that care a lot about lands being in play, whether that's a land effect or if we have some big fatties we need to throw down. Let's get into them. Our first land lever is Blackblade Reforged. It's going to give the equipped creature +1/+1 for each land we control, and it's super cheap to equip to legendaries. Crucible of Worlds might be the best card in the entire deck. It's going to allow us to replay our lands from our graveyard, and with all of our fetch lands, that means double landfall triggers. Like I mentioned earlier, all this land and all this ramp is going to allow us to play some big fatties, and I love some big fatties. I'm a Timmy player, so I've got Jin Cataxius Korahker as one of them, and it's going to allow us to draw 7 cards at our end step and make sure our opponents don't have any answers to our board. Maloku the Clouded Mirror is a Moonfolk wizard, and everybody knows Moonfolk are super powerful. It's just going to allow us to return our lands to our hand, get a little bit of value by making an illusion, so we can replay those lands for more landfall triggers. Sometimes we may not feel like playing our lands, or we get completely flooded out. Molten Vortex will allow us to turn those lands into shocks. We're going to deal 2 damage to a creature or player. Nahiri's Lithoforming combos quite well with Crucible of Worlds. It's going to allow us to sacrifice a ton of lands to draw a ton of cards, and then play that many lands again, and if we can play our lands from the graveyard, that's Value Town. Nezahul the Primal Tides, another big baddie that we can throw down for a lot of mana. It can't be countered, we have no maximum hand size, and we're going to draw a ton of cards every time somebody casts a non-creature spell. It is an Izzet without Niv Mizzet. He's another 6 mana, expensive to cast card that can't be countered, and will draw us a ton of cards, and also get in some damage for us. The newest Niv Mizzet had to make the list as well. He combos quite well with our Commander. When our Commander deals damage, he's going to let us draw a ton of cards, and our landfall pieces that deal damage will get us cards as well. Seismic Assault's another card that's going to turn our lands into direct damage. We don't feel like playing them, discard them to shock something. Sphinx of the Second Sun is another overcosted creature that lets us draw cards. We get another beginning phase in our post-combat main phase, so we get to untap, upkeep, and draw. Say we get completely flooded, which can happen in a deck with a lot of lands in it. We've got Tectonic Reformation, will allow us to discard our lands to draw cards. That's cycling, and we can cycle this away if we really don't need it. Trade Routes is another one that's going to allow us to bounce lands to our hand so we can repeat landfall abilities. Also, if we get flooded, we can discard lands to get fresh cards in our hand. Last and certainly not least is Ulamog the Infinite Gyre. This huge Eldrazi is a game-warping creature, and it can take the place of about any other large Eldrazi or any other large threat. This is just a placeholder. Whenever big, bad creatures you want to play, it is your deck now after all. Now that we wrapped up all the important cards in this deck, I think it's time to get into that combo I've been hyping up so darn much. So let's get into it. This combo is an infinite combo that will win you the game with the right pieces in play, but it does take a few cards. The 2 most important are Walking Atlas and Retreat the Coral Helm. Walking Atlas, like we mentioned, puts a land into play, and Retreat the Coral Helm will untap a creature. So every time a land ETBs, we can untap the Walking Atlas to put another land into play. But what land are we putting into play? We are running the bounce lands. Up here I've got Izzet Boiler Works because it is a true classic. When it ETBs, you've got to return another land to your hand. You can just keep returning Izzet Boiler Works. That way you can keep putting it into play for infinite landfall triggers. When you pair that with a card like Akum Hellkite that deals damage, which we've got a few of in this deck, you will win the game on the spot. That about wraps it up. Luckily, I've got the full deck list on Moxfield if you want to dig into it a little deeper and actually build this deck. So anyways, thanks for watching. I really appreciate you. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.